Hello, good morning. So, we got a bit cut off last time. We tried to implement suspense because I forgot we had a thing in kindergarten, but now we're actually going to do it. And I also got stuck reflecting on the API, but I've been having this in the back of my mind, and I don't think we should change this. We should have create async. And maybe we'll change it to create query because I do think there should be a mutation primitive as well. So so that's the only thing, because those are the two async processes you do in a UI. It's fetching something you want to display asynchronously, and there's a lot of complexity to that. And then it's you want to perform something asynchronously, which is a mutation. So create async as a fundamental primitive doesn't make sense to me, because it really is only about fetching data and displaying it asynchronously. But as I mentioned, whenever you perform a mutation, which isn't like directly a value you want to put in the UI, but you want to manage the states for it. Okay, so let's take a look at what Claude came up with. So yeah, so it actually performed the implementation, and what it did. What the hell is this? Oh, I did a stream yesterday trying to make a Roblox game with my daughter. And there was a lot to learn there, so it was a bit of a slow stream. But what I discovered today is that I can actually combine Claude Code with Roblox or Roblox Studio. So we're gonna try to do another stream, build another game, and I'm not gonna fiddle around with Lua scripts. I'm just gonna use Claude Code for that. And then we figured out like the camera navigation and all that stuff. So I think that's gonna be really, really fun. So yeah, anyways, so modify component. So it adds a suspense boundary marker. The thing I think we should rather do here is that we should create an actual suspense component abstraction. Maybe it will inherit from reactive component, I'm not sure. So we're gonna ask it about that. Added its pending property to reactive child, find suspense boundary. That makes a lot of sense. And then modify JSX so that when a promise is detected, finds the suspense boundary, marks reactive child as pending, and notifies suspense. Clears the region, shows nothing while loading. Yeah, that's not right either. This is what suspense does. Maybe that's what it means. We need to ask it about that. So there's two things. Renders the result value directly in the then callback, yes. Checks is disposed before rendering to handle cleanup during pending. Yes, exactly. So if the suspense is unmounted while something nested is asynchronously resolving, it shouldn't like do anything. Notify suspense when complete or on error. And then created suspense TS, implemented suspense component with reactive state management. And then exported suspense, create a comprehensive demo. Okay, so there were two things we wanted to ask about. We should discuss creating a suspense component. And ask why it wants to clear the region in a reactive child. That shouldn't be necessary because this is exactly what suspense does. Well, yeah, exactly. That's what suspense does. Let's see if my flow works here. Hello? Oh, now it's working. Nice. Okay, this is great, but a couple of things I want to discuss before we make any changes. The first thing is we should evaluate creating an explicit suspense component. Could you review what would be the similarities between a reactive component and a suspense component, and what are the differences? Does it make sense to create an explicit suspense component? The other thing is that I noted that in the reactive child, you say that we're clearing the region for the reactive child, but I don't think that's necessary, because this is exactly what suspense does. It clears its region or doesn't mount its children. So I don't think the reactive child has to concern itself with that. Huh? It even bullet point or it's really cool. Yeah, I really like Flow. They did a good job. Let's see. I got sick again. Ugh. Um, yeah, would increase benefit for minimum complexity for minimal benefit. Okay, so you're right. Reactive child shouldn't clear its region. Is needed in the then callback. We do need to clear before inserting the result content. Okay. And shouldn't show it. Okay, let's see. No, keep. I love this. Like Claude seems to be more, what's it called? Confident, which is great, right? This is the same thing. Watching these Tesla autopilot, like it's about being confident. But what we could do is that we could extend the reactive component. I just don't like having isSuspense as part of reactive component. And also when it goes up the tree, it can like check instance of suspense component, right? It's just way more, yes, remove the initial region clear. Okay, great. One more thing though. I like that you're confident about like not creating another suspense component, but hear me out here. So what I would recommend is that we create a new class called suspense component, but it will extend reactive component, where we add this flag and the special behavior. And the nice thing about this is when the reactive child goes up the component tree to find a suspense component, it can like check instance of suspense component. It's, to me, like a reacting component has nothing to do with suspense, so it doesn't feel right to start overloading that concept. Does that make sense? Let's see. You're absolutely right. Yeah. That's much cleaner design. Let me think through this. So your proposal, suspense component extends reactive component. Then reactive child find suspense becomes exactly. Yes, exactly. Great. Go ahead and fix the two issues we discussed. Okay, and then we can play around with create query. Maybe we can actually code that, because it would be fun to play around with the actual API and like extending, because create query is just an abstraction over, it's just an abstraction over, what's it called? Create state, I think. Well, we were discussing So profile has this promise. And how does a reactive child... Yeah, so this is the one thing we haven't discussed. Is reusing the same promise. Yeah. So there has to be... Yeah, we should discuss that before we start implementing create query. Oh. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Yeah, I really hope I get my daughter to engage in like building Roblox games instead of just consuming them. Like what I love about her, well, there's many things I love about her, but one thing is she has these big ideas. And I totally relate to that. I remember being a child and having these ideas and thinking it was very simple to achieve those things. And I would give up very quickly when I like realized how complex it was. So I hope I can like instill in her that she can do these things. She just have to go at it at the right pace and try to distill things, right? They're big ideas, there's many parts. Identify the minimal thing you can do to move towards your goal. That's such a good life lesson. And the earlier she understands that, the more she's going to learn. Kind of have an engineer mindset. Anyway, both changes has been successfully so blah blah blah. Create a suspense component. Blah blah blah. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna test this first and see if this works, and then we're gonna discuss adding some values to the promise so that you can reuse the same promise across reactive children to avoid it throwing to suspense again. So, because even if it's resolved, it would have to throw to suspense, right? Because there's nothing on the promise itself indicating that it is actually resolved. Let's see, where are we running the demo? It's on localhost 5174. By the way, I made yeah, it didn't work. Async reactive child must be wrapped in suspense component. Okay. We can figure that out. By the way, I made even more changes to Divergent to-dos. I finally figured out what I wanted to do. I want to just share this briefly before we go in and debug this. Sorry for jumping around, but I have a lot of stuff on my mind. So one thing, I had the wrong coloring, so now it looks much better. But then we have this feature called activity, and it shows you what you did through the whole year, and then it creates this Hi. Hæ? Nå holder jeg på. Hæ? Hæ? Ja, si hei da. Hallo! Ja, det er Lukker du døra, Emma? Lukker du døra? Ja, men jeg skal si deg hvordan vi fant ut. Vi så at en av videoene dine var på live. Ja. They find it super exciting that I'm doing streaming, or that I stream. Anyways, so yes, so the thing is, it's doing this summary thing. So if I hit tab here, you can see that it every weekend there's a batch process going to OpenAI where it creates this summary of the week, and you can use this for many different things. But then I also generated this summary, which was supposed to be like this engaging thing. So when you open it on Monday morning, let's see, I can trigger it here. You get this like recap of your previous week. It just shows you how many twos you completed, the heat map of that week. And then I would have like this generated positive coaching thing. The problem is that it makes it feel like someone's watching you. It didn't matter how. I thought the problem was that it didn't quite capture the motivation. But what I realized is that if, regardless of how motivating it was, it felt like someone was watching you. And the whole point of this app is that it's yours. There's nothing here watching you. So what I did instead is that I throw in the suggested summary of that week, which you can read through, and then you can change it if you want to do that. And then you save that. Oh, this is bad. And then you save that week summary. I have to fix that border. And then you save the week summary. So it you owning it, but then you don't have to actually write the summary, right? So I think this is really good. Yeah, whatever. So let's get back and see what's going on here. So so we have oh my god, this is a complex thing. Okay, this is interesting. I'm just gonna give it to Claude. Let's see. There's an error. Yes, there is that we're creating new in the suspense function, but it's not properly replacing the component. Why is that? Oh, I didn't. Sorry about that. There we go. In the system, but it's not properly replacing the component in the context. Let me. Let's. This is the annoying thing about Claude CLI is that it doesn't always handle the scrolling that well. And especially if you have a long, like multi-session running session, like even if you do like clear and start a new session, like the actual shell still has all the history of all the other stuff you did, and suddenly it just starts scrolling like crazy. And the demo should now be working. The error when suspense component function is called, enter component scope creates a reactive component and sets current instance to it. Inside the suspense function, we are creating a new suspense component and updating the parent's child, but we weren't updating the global current instance variable. Okay, let's see. I don't think that's gonna fix it, because this is not. This should be when. Yeah. No, that did not fix it. I'm not sure if this is related to like when it builds up the component tree. This should be like, yeah, there seems to be an order thing here. So first it goes into the suspense component, but then it might have a nested component, right? Which becomes the current component, and that has a reactive child that needs to go up and find. Like, I guess, when do you add the parent to the component when you're evaluating the component? I guess that should be the first thing that happens. Let's see. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm a little bit bummed out. Like this Divergent to Do's project is like it's really closing in on, like, it is production and there are a minimal amount of people using it, but I don't know what to do from here. Um I'm really like, it's a success story in the sense that I've done what I can do from start to end with a product, which is really, really cool. But I would really love to see this project become something more. Um, yeah, I'm having some conversations and having some thoughts. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, uh, you were absolutely right. The root cause evaluate component function called enter component scope, which created a reactive component, stored it in the component variable. The suspense function ran and swapped that component for a suspense component using replace current component. But at the end of evaluate component function, it was returning the original component variable, not the actual current component. So the parent chain ended up pointing to the old reactive component instead of the new suspense component. Okay. I don't think that's the no, that did not fix it. Could you please explain to me the flow of creating nested components, and when do we set the reference to the parent, and how does the reactive children point to their parent? So kind of like tell me how this tree of components is actually set up. Yeah, please do that. Yeah, the way I'm thinking about this is that when you have a component, it should create the component instance, right? And then it should start like diving into whatever it's creating. And it should just start creating like down the tree. And then I guess, yeah, so if you have a component that has like creates a suspense component, that suspense component goes into its children, creates whatever, and then yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of confused by this. I thought this was quite straightforward. Like it just makes the current component down the tree the current component, and then immediately as it creates new components, they get a reference to their parent. That's the first thing that should happen. So then if a nested component has a reactive child, that reactive child points to first its component, and then that has a suspense parent. Yeah, so I'm a bit confused why it's not working. But I don't understand the implementation. I haven't read it. Well, I have read it, but not the latest version. Now let me explain the complete flow and what was wrong. The component tree construction flow. We should document this. For reactive component, when new reactive component is called in the constructor, yeah, sets this parent to parent. If parent is reactive component, automatically add itself to parent.children. For reactive child, when new reactive child parent region is called in the constructor, sets this parent to parent. Always add itself to parent.children. Problem with suspense. What was happening? Create element, evaluate component function creates reactive component A. Suspense function creates suspense component B and replaces A. Suspense returns a function. Oh, it's the actual. Oh, so the suspense component implementation returns a function. Yes, it does, because it's reactive. Evaluate component function returns this the function exit component scope sets current instance to null. Calls append child container function parent instance get current instance returns null. What's happening now? Okay, let's see. Evaluate component attaches the suspense component to the function. Okay. Append child checks for attached component. Yeah, because this is the thing. Maybe this is not obvious, but we do allow, and this needs to work. So when I have a component and I have, because you can't say, let's say we have some state here, create state, count 0. So the thing with this approach is that you can't say state dot count equals 0, you return null, right? Or you're gonna return div. And this needs to work. This is a valid type of component. So the way you would do this here is that you actually return a reactive scope, which is state.count equals 0, null, or whatever you want to display. And this is how this is how the suspense component is implemented. When we return just a function, there is no reference to the parent component. But why does it need that? Okay, let's see if it works first. I still have questions. No, it's still not working. Could you explain to me why we need to attach the component to the function? Because if the component returns like DOM elements, we don't do that, do we? So I'm confused by that. And also I tested the demo and it's still not working. Yeah, we might have to go deeper on this one. We're returning not the component. But when a component returns, we're returning the function, not the component. Well, why are we doing that? Yeah, so what I don't understand here is that returning a function from a component is the same as returning a div or whatever. It shouldn't matter. You should still return the actual component instance. And then it just happens that the returned UI is a function and not like DOM elements. And that should be fine. Could you validate this? Yeah. Receives it only depends on if it has but if current returns a function is null. Yeah, so oops. Yeah, so the thing is, I don't think we should call it DOM root. We should call it something else, and then that result can be a node, or it can be a function, or it can be null. Okay, and then when we actually want to apply the UI, we use that property called UI or whatever we want to call it to figure out what we want to do. Is it a node, is it a function, or is it null? Yeah, render result. That's nice. Yeah, it would be fun to get this running. I'm super pumped to try to create the query thing and then mutation and then yeah, I don't like the term query mutation though. It sounds like very technical. I like create async, but at the same time it's too generic because both queries and mutations are async. Yeah. No, maybe they should be called that. Yeah, but I think those are the three primitives you need for UIs. You need like local state, just state, or client state, or whatever you want to call it. And then you need to be able to asynchronously. So it's almost like create async state because you're creating state. That's the thing. It's just async. Maybe that's a better term. Create async state. And then, but then you have the mutation thing. Create async state. Yeah, so you could call it like action or something. Like there is no concept here of an action because you just have functions, right? Here's what you were absolutely correct. The key insight was that the component should always return the component instance, regardless of whether it returns a download or a function. Yeah, I think you're doing good, Claude. I want to say you're doing good, but it still doesn't work though. Okay, so I think this conceptually makes a lot of sense, but the demo doesn't work still. Could you first of all just simplify the demo? And then I'll see if it works. And if it still doesn't work, we're gonna do some console logging so we can like understand what's actually happening as it tries to render this stuff. And make the example only about a simple use of suspense, and then comment out the rest or whatever. Dun, dun. Dun, 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 dun. Ba, ba, bum, bum, ba, bum, bum. Okay, cool. So it still doesn't work. Let's see what it created here. Let's save. Okay, so it has suspense, and then it has a delay of data loaded. Okay, this is perfect. So let's see what happens here. So it's creating reactive child. Yeah, so it's pointing to this one. So there's something I don't understand here. So what it could be is that when this is actually translated, so this is the mental thing, is that when this is rendering, simple suspense test, JSX, you see here we have suspense. And then we're passing it these children. But they shouldn't evaluate immediately. They should evaluate lazily when this is being actually created. So I want to ask it about that. So when I look at the compiled code, we have all of these like JSX dev being called for elements and for the suspense component, but it seems to me that maybe we are eagerly like evaluating like the DOM elements, like calling JSX dev with DOM elements. Well, so I would expect like when we pass a suspense component function as a reference to JSX dev, that we're just passing in the children, and then as the suspense component actually executes, then it evaluates the actual children. So are we doing things eagerly here? And we should rather do it lazily? Hello, Mona. Ah, you're absolutely right. This is a critical insight. Let me check what's happening. Yeah, evaluated before suspense runs. So the div is created eagerly, but is still a function. The div is created before suspense run, which whatever get current instant. The problem is that it runs, it calls create element div and get current instant return spot. Let me add more logging. Let's see. Let's see. Oops. Oops, what happened? Once more. Oh, so it did add more. Let's see what it thinks. Yeah, exactly. I think so too. Okay. Now I can see the issue. Look at this sequence. App parent instance, app starts, H1 with app as current. Reactive component, this is the suspense children div. It's been created with, yeah, as the current instance. The problem of suspense are being evaluated before. The solution, we need to ensure that when the component's children are evaluated, get current instance returns that component, but the children are evaluated before. This is a fundamental issue with how should receive children as a function. Oh, interesting. Let's see. Let's give it the source code. So this is the source code, but I cannot find that suspense create element thing. Interesting. Okay, so fundamentally, how are we going to deal with that? So fundamentally, the children are, yeah, because this is the thing, is that when you're putting children to a component, those children belongs to the parent. actually. Like, technically, they belong to the parent. Only the children you actually define inside the component belongs to that component. So that does make sense. But then how does actually suspense work? Yeah, it's interesting because this is not really correct. Like, these elements belongs to this component, like, technically. That is very interesting. How are we gonna deal with that? Check the browser console. I'm thinking. Yeah, because how are you gonna create h1, h2 div? This is so interesting. Now check the browser console again. Oh, this is really weird. Creating reactive child. Yeah, where the hell is the... Wait a minute. This is weird. It's literally here. JSX dev suspense. And suspense. Source component. Is this where suspense? And yeah, that's just suspense component. Then we have it. There it is. Suspense. Yeah, export function suspense. This is so weird. This is really weird. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening here. But I'm still thinking about, like, how do you make suspense children owned by suspense? I guess the thing is, okay. So I think with React, the way React works is that it's not only a component tree, like it's a full virtual DOM. So they are literally walking up the virtual DOM, right? So from the perspective of virtual DOM, every element has a parent element, and that parent element might be a component. So that will always be correct, but we don't want that overhead. So we only have a component tree, which means that, yeah, the current component isn't... Oh, that's so interesting. So if you look at the code, how the code actually runs, yeah, I'm not sure how to fix this. So we kind of express that these elements are part of suspense, but in terms of runtime execution, these things are created before this. So there is no sense of, yeah. Yeah, where are the children? Here are the children. So there is no sense of ownership there. Yeah, I'm very unsure how this is gonna work. What's it? Is it doing? Let me check the demos compiled app code marker. The browser console logs. Yeah, this is super weird. Call? Yeah. Like, why isn't suspense being called? Well, not being called, but why isn't JSX dev logging out when we pass the suspense component? Only when we pass like a string. That's super weird. But it could maybe be because oh, I think I know what it is. Oh, you know, I think I know what it is. It's when it tries to so our reactive child is run before the suspense, right? Because it's the most nested first property, nested property, children property, right? So it evaluates the the reactive child and it immediately tries to find its parent, but it can't. So it throws an error. So we actually never get to the evaluation of the suspense because we already throw an error in the reactive child. Does that make sense? That was a really bad explanation, but that's the great thing about AI. They are quite good at distilling meaning from text. Yeah, exactly. But do not try to make any changes. We need to discuss this JSX eager mechanism, like how we're actually going to make suspense work conceptually. Okay, do those changes. Yeah, this is getting messy. I think we need to reapproach this. Because now it's just making a bunch of changes, trying to make it work. But I think we have a fundamental conceptual problem. And I'm not sure how to... Let's see if it runs though. Okay, so it actually runs now. Okay. Please remove the logging and tell me, or sorry, give me a review of how it actually works now. Yeah. So the thing is, immediately when reactive child is evaluated, it's gonna try to find its parent. But that parent doesn't exist yet. So, like, what I want is for children to be lazily evaluated. But that's not really possible. So what I think it's doing here is that it's just lazily running the reactive child, which is not what I want. Well, I guess what it does, it checks if it's a promise, and then it lazily evaluates the promise. which is fine. And maybe it's okay. Maybe that is better. Because then you have eager rendering, which is simple. And the good thing about eager rendering is that we create all the elements in memory, and only at the end we apply it to the DOM, which is also a good thing. So the DOM doesn't the DOM doesn't repaint every time we add elements, right? Which might seem counterintuitive, but the thing is that when we read the code, it looks like we create the H1, then we create the children, but we don't do that. We actually create the children first. So it kind of goes bottom up. And then at the end, when it evaluates the H1 or whatever the container is and applies it to the DOM, then everything else is already created, which is exactly what we want. Okay. Let's see what it says. Whoa, this is a lot. Oh my God. Excellent. Let me provide you with a comprehensive review of how the suspense implementation works. The suspense implementation introduces a specialized component-type suspense component that manages async boundaries in the reactive component tree. It coordinates between async reactive children and the UI state. Suspense component extends reactive component to inherit lifecycle and tree management, tracks pending async children in blah blah blah, provides blah blah blah. The suspense function implements a clever pattern, gets the current reactive component created by enter component scope, creates a new suspense component with the same parent, transfers all properties from the old component to the new one. Oh, I don't like that. Okay, so this is why. Oh, okay. I don't like that. So what I think it should do. So with the suspense component, I don't like the fact that it is responsible for like replacing the current component. That seems weird. What I think will be a better approach is that when we intend to create a new component, we check if it is the suspense component, and if it is, we're going to create a, like it's the suspense function, sorry. And if it is the suspense function, then we create a suspense component. So it's like the creator that decides, not the createe. Yeah, I think microtask, it makes sense. I'm going to talk about that shortly. Okay, let's see if we can read while it's creating stuff. So creates a reactive state using create state, blah, blah, blah. Overrides the 3 suspense component methods to update React. Oh, okay. Let's wait until it's done. I really like working through the terminal, but it's also kind of annoying that you can't like look at stuff you have done while it's working. I think I have to stop streaming soon, but yeah, let's see. Okay. Okay, but it's still giving an error here, which is interesting. Anyways. Okay, great. Now give me a condensed summary of how this flow actually works. It's very interesting watching these discussions on AI, like how the current LLMs aren't really intelligence, because it doesn't learn anything by interacting with the world. It only learns by the closed reinforcement loop during training, which is true. But this is the safeguard, right? They shouldn't change based on interactions with the world, because that's when it gets out of hand. The training needs to be in a closed environment. They can still do bad things, right? But they won't like learn anything new and change its behavior based on interactions with the world. And still, maybe you could trick it in, again, trick it to do bad things, but it wouldn't like go on its own, and change its like moral framework. Again, maybe you can trick it to bypass its moral framework, but it won't like change it based on its interactions. Okay, suspense flow summary. JSX children are eagerly evaluated before parent components run. When suspense contains async children, the async detection happens before suspense component exists in the parent chain. Exactly. The solution. Creator-based instantiation. Hei du. Går det bra? Hva er det du holder på med da? Ja, men pappa er straks ferdig. Hva er det du gjør for noe da? Har du laget en lek til? Ja, den er superkul. Den vil jeg gjerne komme opp og se. Ja, jeg holder akkurat på å gjøre meg ferdig her. Se der, den henger der, fordi den filmer pappa. Sånn at de som ser på meg nå, de ser meg, ser du der? Ser meg på skjermen der. Det er telefonen som gjør det. Er det kult? Jeg vil se også. Kan du også se? Se hvis du hopper opp her. Hopp. Jeg ser med. Der er du. Hallo? Hallo? Vi kan se på det etterpå, at du sier hallo. Mamma, hvorfor snakker ikke de? Nei, jeg snakker til de bare. De kan ikke snakke til meg, men de kan skrive til meg her sånn. Hvorfor kan ikke de snakke til meg? Dere er dumme. Nei, det må jeg ikke si. Men du, kan ikke du gi meg noen minutter til da? Skjønner ikke de hva jeg sier, fordi jeg snakker norsk. Ja, det er helt riktig. Det er ingen av de som er norske, tror jeg. Var det dumt? Men du, gi meg 5 minutter til. Hvorfor kan ikke du snakke norsk? Nei, for da skjønner de ikke hva jeg sier, så jeg må snakke engelsk. Du må gjerne henge her hvis du vil det, men pappa bare får gjøre seg ferdig. Åja, så bra. Okay, sorry. So creator-based instantiation. So if it's a suspense component as it's creating, like JSX dev or JSX, the JSX factory, let's call it the JSX factory. The JSX factory checks if the component function is the suspense. And then it rather creates a suspense component instead of a reactive component from the start. So that's great. And then deferred boundary check. And this is the beauty, I think. So when a reactive child returns a promise, it's going to queue that by first finding the suspense boundary, throw an error if it doesn't exist, and then register a pending child. But the point is, what if that re-evaluates when async function returns from the furthest suspense lookup? Yeah, but this won't work. And I think that's why we're seeing the error. So how can we make this work? Like it kind of works, right? On the first render, no. How are we gonna make this work? Because it's gonna create like tearing. I think that's the terminology. Because it will render immediately, right? So even if this is a micro task, it's gonna render everything else first, and then it throws to suspense, which is gonna kind of remove things again. So I don't think this is the solution. The real solution is to make the children of suspense lazy. But we can't do that because we don't have control of the compilation. Maybe this is a thing I just have to reflect on. This is very interesting. I didn't think this. So just in case things aren't clear. So what's happening here is that this line is going to run before this line in the actual compiled code. And then this is going to run first, and then it sees that it's a promise, and currently it's just going to put it on a micro task, which means that everything else is going to render here. So the div is going to be applied, this h2 content is going to be applied, and even this div is going to be applied. But I guess there's like nothing here yet. And then suddenly it evaluates, and suspense will then remove this stuff. Or will it? Okay, so unless suspense doesn't apply its children, after the micro task. But then suspense, what if there isn't anything async? Then suspense would still wait a micro task before adding the children to the DOM, which is also bad. Huh. This is so interesting. Okay, I want to ask it. Okay, so I see this deferred micro task thing as kind of a solution, but I'm not sure if it's the right one. Because there has to be situations where, for example, it will append everything to the DOM that's part of the suspense children, and then suddenly on the micro task, things are removed from the DOM again, because now the reactive child is notifying the suspense boundary to actually not show the children. And what if the suspense component has children that isn't async? It should synchronously add those. So there's like a conflict here, I think. Okay, we need to discuss this. Don't make any changes. Let's just discuss it. Is there another alternative here? Or do you still feel confident that this won't cause any weird UI behavior? Yeah, what would the other solution be? So it has to synchronously evaluate like everything else. So what it could do, just like to have something, is that whenever a reactive child evaluates a promise, it could keep track of them. And then when the suspense boundary actually evaluates, so it doesn't notify the suspense boundary. What it rather does is that it keeps track of async children. And then when a suspense boundary actually is evaluated, it will go in and collect those reactive children. But then there is no strong like parent-child relationship. Yeah, visual best solution might be option 5. When we create a reactive child with a function child, we could. What's option 5? Synchronous parent marking. When reactive child is created with a function, before running autorun, walk parent chain if we find reactive component not yet upgraded to suspense component. Yeah, but this is the whole point. There is no walking up yet. Yeah, you know, I think I want to jump out of the stream and then I have to reflect on this because we haven't found a solution yet. So the one I mentioned, like, do not walk up the parent chain, but just like keep tabs on anything async, and then suspense becomes like a collector of that async. No, that won't work because you might have like sibling suspense trees, and then you can risk like one tree collecting the async of the other tree. There has to be a strong parent-child relationship here. And the only way to do that is to lazily evaluate the children. This is so interesting. I wonder how React does this. Because React has the same thing. It's like the children of a component that you express. So you have. So in React, these children belong to this component. This is the beauty of it, because if these children are using some state from this component, and this component reconciles, it can update just these children without affecting the component, which is great. But how does how is it able to? And I guess, yeah, like, oh, but this is also interesting. Oh, wait a minute. Now I see how it works in React. Now, okay, this is interesting. So the reason this works in React is because this isn't possible in React, right? You need a component to use suspense. So you can't do this in React. Right? Because you have to use a promise inside a component to throw to suspense. You can't just inline stuff like this. That doesn't make any sense in React. That's interesting. So then we could say this isn't possible. This doesn't hit this suspense boundary. It needs an outer suspense boundary. I think that's a fair perspective, technically, because it's technically correct. But it's not expected behavior, right? Because it could be, it's not even a caveat because it is correct behavior. But it's, again, probably unexpected. But what we could do is that we can enhance the error message that suspense only covers components, not inline children. Okay, I'm gonna tell it. You know what? I figured out the problem. So in React, for example, when you use suspense, the only way to actually throw to that suspense boundary is to have an actual nested component. But this is not the case in this UI library. We allow you to kind of inline a reactive child as a child of the suspense itself. But technically, that child doesn't talk to the suspense component. It would talk to a suspense parent that's higher up in the component tree. That's like above the app component in the example here. And I think that's fair. That's really how it should work. We need to figure out what to do about when a user actually inlines a reactive child with suspense. I want to suggest that we just enhance the error message that you can't inline reactive children in suspense. You have to actually use a nested component. But what if you do have a higher up suspense component and then you inline a reactive child with suspense? You're probably gonna get confused that it's the higher up suspense that actually triggers. So we have to figure this out, but I want you to change the code so that we don't actually support inline reactive children to hit the suspense within the same component. It needs to go higher up in the component tree. And then change the example to reflect this behavior so we can like test it. And then I'm going to reflect on how we're going to deal with this situation. If you have any thoughts on it, please share them. Bam. Okay, this was really cool. I'm happy I was able to reason about this. Oh, you're absolutely right. I wish I could have like some variations of this. Oh, come on. Yeah, let's wait and then see what it gives us a summary. Yeah, but it should clean up. But also go in and clean up the whole micro task thing as well, please. Okay. Let's see. What did it actually create as an example here? Oh, what do I have? I think my partner is... No, it wasn't my partner. Let's see. Async data. Oh, yeah, but this doesn't need to be... Okay, it's going into like the most complex example. So I think we should do... For the example, we should do this first. Oh, interesting. So I changed the example. We need to make that return function work, but I changed the example so we actually return a div from the async data component. So we can deal with that later. But we're still getting an error that it can't find the suspense component, which I find weird. But I know async data is the parent component, but it should continue to go up the component tree until it finds a suspense component, right? But you're getting there. Okay. This is interesting. Hello. Well, I do it for fun. It's not work. Mhm. Er det Oi, må ikke tråkke på den, da. Da blir den ødelagt. Er du utålmodig? Har du veldig lyst til å game? Ja. Ja, men vi kan game. Jeg trodde jeg var ferdig, skjønner du, men så skjedde det noe feil. Og så blir jeg litt sånn hva er det som er feil? Det må jeg finne ut av. Men yeah, but talking about being a dad, I have to jump off and play some Lego Undercover with my son. So I really got an hour, so I'm overdue. So yeah. Have a good Sunday. Enjoy your kids. And keep up your energy as well. Bye bye. Just have to check this. Is never passed to create element. Children are being evaluated directly without suspense being. Oh, so we're actually. Now I'm in a frustrating spot because I should really continue working on this to keep my mental model going. And now my son wants to play, and if I stop now, I'm gonna get so frustrated not being able to complete. This is like why having a brain like mine, getting obsessed about things, having these side projects all the time, and having kids, this is the point where it gets challenging. Because he's gonna get very impatient with me, and I'm gonna blame him for dragging me away from this, like passive aggressively. And that's such a bad dad. I'm a bad dad. But okay, we're gonna keep this. I just wanna have one mental note. Suspense is children being evaluated directly without suspense being. Looking at the error, I can see that it seems like when we render suspense. So the flow is app renders, encounters suspense, suspense gets called somehow, returns a function. I mean, which includes. But the suspense reactive component was never created. Oh, that's not true. That is not true. Because now it's JSX P. Where is it? Here we have app, JSX div, async data. Right? This is the generated source. So I'm not sure what's happening here. Oh, why did we add the source mapping? Okay, I'm gonna do one last thing here. Let's just drop the async data.
Papa.
Now it has suspense. But now there is no suspense. So there's something about the way this is being. Oh, it finds async data and then, oh, it probably runs it immediately then as well.
Papa called me
So I think the parent should be responsible for, or when it creates this is the problem, is the execution of how it creates this stuff. So okay, so I think the problem is that when we eagerly create the components and the elements, the way this works is that when we have a suspense component and the child is another component, it will actually go in and still evaluate that nested component. But the way this should work is that the parent components should be the ones evaluating the generated tree. We shouldn't just evaluate the generated tree immediately. It should be by component, right? Does that make sense? Please try to fix that and then give me a report. Yeah, I can stop it now. Okay, I have to go or this is gonna end badly. Bye.